Good evening. Calling to order the Half Moon Bay Planning Commission for Tuesday, September 10th, 2019. Start with the Pledge of Allegiance. And roll call.
Okay. I can still do roll call. Commissioner Polgar. Here. Commissioner Reddick.
Present.
Commissioner Hernandez.
I am present.
Vice Chair Benjamin.
Present.
And Chair Holt.
Here.
All commissioners are present this evening.
Okay. Next item is the approval of minutes, the minutes from August 27th, 2019.
Move to approve the minutes as modified in the released memos that we received today.
I make a second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Aye. All right, approved. Okay, so now we go into our public comment period. This is the time for public comments on items not on the agenda. If you wish to speak, you need to fill out a green speaker card. I do not have any cards for general public comment, so we'll open up the public comment period. Seeing nobody jumping up, we'll close it, and we can move on to our first public hearing item, which is the 2019 Working Draft Downtown Parking Assessment.
Good evening, Chair, Planning Commission, and community members. We're really happy tonight to introduce you to Ryan Anderson. He's been our Public Works intern over the summer. Ryan's last day with us is currently occurring. He's going to be getting back to Cal Poly, where he'll be a junior in the city planning program. He's worked on quite a few projects for the city engineer this summer, but we got to tap a little bit of his time as well and share him. And Ryan prepared a downtown parking survey and assessment. You got the really, really thin chicken scratch version almost in your report, because I didn't have the new and improved version. So you now have the new and improved version with data, and it's still a draft. Staff will be adding additional peak period times to it. But Ryan's prepared to present some components of his study, and I go ahead and let you take it away, Ryan. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate being able to present this here today. This was put together by me and an intern for the city manager's office, and it originally started as a parking assessment for the Carter Park project, but it was expanded to account for all parking within the downtown area.
This actually never happens, so.
Oh. Okay, so first, to start off this presentation, I'm just going to discuss why downtown parking assessment is valuable to understanding the functions of our downtown and how populated it is and how many parking spaces we have available. Then I'll describe our method for collecting data for this project, and then I'll delve into the actual data that we collected and to see how much parking is available at different times throughout the week, and then we'll look at the conclusions from that study. So it's important to understand for a downtown how parking is being utilized at different times throughout the week, especially in a city like downtown where it can fluctuate between weekends, weekdays, and different times during each of those days. So we also want to account for the city's parking supply and how much total spaces it has, along with the way those spaces are managed, including time restrictions. It's also valuable to understand how much parking we have available for future projects for the city, such as the Carter Park redevelopment project and any future zoning amendments. So our method for collecting data for this project started out with simply counting the number of parking spaces at each block within the downtown area. And then we decided on 5 what we called peak times for the downtown, when there'd be a significant amount of traffic in the area and parking would be at a potential maximum for that day, to establish the occupancy level of the downtown at these different times. And then we analyzed this data by presenting it in the forms of occupancy maps and charts, so that we could see trends and patterns within the parking. So the 5 peak times that we decided on for this project were weekday and Friday during lunch, which we designated as from noon to 1:30, as well as school is being dismissed, which is 2:30 to 4. And then we also included Friday evening and Saturday afternoon. And all of these data points provide a snapshot of what parking occupancy is in the downtown at this time, since data was collected just once during each of these times. And all of this data was collected during the summer, which we figure is a especially high traffic period of time for Half Moon Bay. So the area that we designated as downtown in Half Moon Bay is bordered by the Main Street Bridge to the north and extends all the way down to Correa Street to the south. And we want to include a few prominent parking lots for the city. So we included the Cunha School parking lot, the library parking lot, the Shoreline Shopping Center parking lot, as well as the community center and the Stone Pine lot and post office. And we think that this encompasses the main body of downtown and the main amount of parking that's available to those trying to access downtown. So this is a simple map just showing the time limit for parking, for street parking within the downtown area. You can see that on Main Street and all of the adjacent blocks, parking is limited to 2 hours. And then on Prisma and Johnston Street, it's 12 hours. And then beyond that, it's mostly unrestricted, with the exception of around the library and in front of the school, where it's limited to 30 minutes or less. So this is the actual data that we collected for this street parking. And you can see there's over 600 total street spaces available within the downtown area. And as to be expected, Saturday afternoon proved to be the highest occupancy time for downtown. This is a more digestible form of this data. Here you can really see the trends and the overall increase in parking occupancy on noon during a Saturday during the summer. Although you can notice that certain streets like Miramontes and Correas, which are located closer to the school and the library, actually have more activity throughout the week. So these radar charts illustrate the parking availability at various times for each of the parking lots that we decided to survey for this study. And you can see that the library, the Stone Pine parking lot, and the school's parking lot were both had higher occupancy levels throughout the week, whereas Shoreline, along with the community center, saw a much higher concentration during the weekend. It should also be noted that when we were collecting data for Saturday at noon, the farmers market was occurring in the Shoreline parking lot, which accounts for the large spike in parking occupancy at that time. So this is a map that we created to show the parking occupancy broken down by each block within the downtown area. You can see the red signifies it's 85 to 100% full, and then orange is 70 to 84, yellow is 50 to 69, and then green is below 50%. And you can see there's a concentration in parking occupancy along Main Street and along Mill Street, which makes sense as people are coming off of 92 and down Main Street and immediately looking for parking. They either park along Main or will turn down Mill Street. For the weekday afternoon, when school's being dismissed, it's very similar data. You can see, though, that on Church Street and Correas, as well as the library parking lot, there's much higher occupancy as people are getting picked up as school's dismissed. Friday noon is also fairly similar. Here we can see there's a higher occupancy rate in the Shoreline parking lot, and the downtown is relatively the same as the rest of the weekdays. Friday night, again, is fairly similar. Shoreline is still somewhat occupied, and you can see that around the school and the library, it's beginning to become less occupied. It should be noted that the Stone Pine and the post office parking lot have remained below 50% occupied for all this time. Saturday during noon is perhaps the most problematic time for Half Moon Bay's downtown parking. You can see that many of the blocks here are red or orange. And again, this is because there was a special event going on, the farmers market in the downtown during this area, and it was on a warm summer day. Though despite this, there are still blocks with less than 50% occupancy, and within any location downtown, there's within 2 blocks, there's a street that has more than, or is no more than 70% occupied. So from these findings, we can assume, or we can conclude that parking, as to be expected, is consistently the highest along Main Street and the adjacent blocks, like Mill Street, for people, as the main flow of traffic is coming off of 92 and straight down to Main Street. Parking is available, though, consistently throughout the downtown area. Even at peak times, such as a Saturday at noon, there's always some parking along a block with at least 15% availability within a 1-block walk of any location downtown. And we plan on extending this survey to include more times, including special events at Carter Park, for example, the Summer's End Festival, which is September 21st. We'd like to see how that affects parking, especially with the Stone Pine parking lot being as close as it is there. But we plan on this being an ongoing study, but this is what the data we've collected so far. So thank you. And now I'm opening up to questions.
And I just wanted to add a couple more notes for the audience, because these topics are addressed in the written report. The inventory of EV charging parking spaces as well as accessible parking spaces are accounted for in the study, but we don't know the occupancy rates of those. And so that's something that we want to be tracking over time. We know that for Carter Park, we're especially doing some work on how to make sure there's accessible parking for that improvement. And that leads to the other topic, which is the Stone Pine Shopping Center portion of that lot. You probably noticed it wasn't highlighted. It's pretty full most of the time, and the property owners really weren't wanting us to count it as part of kind of the more general supply. So we just didn't put it in the study. And so clearly there's people who park there and go to the park and do other things downtown. But we focused on areas where lots of public access is provided. And thank you. Ryan can absolutely answer your questions. And of course, this isn't a public hearing, but if people want to make public comment, they certainly may.
Thank you very much. I do have one public speaker, and since this is just an informational item, we'll take that. Carol Black.
I have a great deal of trouble with this machine here, but hopefully. So first of all, thanks for doing it. That's really great. As you all know, I'm very interested in Carter Park because I live in Cypress Cove. Sorry, I'm trying. I'm very interested in Carter Park because I live in Cypress Cove. The one comment I would make, and then a question. The comment is, you might want to consider looking at Sunday or some key holidays, but in addition, Sunday morning with the church wipes out some of that parking, and the post office has rented their space to the church on Sunday mornings until around 1 or 2 in the afternoon. So depending on what the events might be, it's just worth considering. And could I just ask you, because I wasn't sure, of those 2 places you outlined, Stone Pine and the post office, what's the total number of available spots? Not open, just total.
The total number in Stone Pine is, just 1 second.
Sorry. I couldn't read your number, I'm too old. Oh, thanks. Thanks, Joe. Well, I don't want to hold you up. I can look. It's just part of thinking about, as we put events there, just making sure there's adequate capacity. That's really all I'm asking.
Of course.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
And I like your spider diagrams. Those are great.
Thanks.
Okay, any questions, comments from the commission? Commissioner Benjamin?
Yeah, thank you. So I enjoyed reading it, and I appreciated the presentation. Very well done. I did have some questions, just piggybacking on Jill's mention of the Stone Pine and maybe some reticence about being there. Do you believe that the school parking lot, the post office parking lot are widely perceived as being available for public parking? And I realize that you've been here for a summer, so I don't want to put you in the position of greater expertise than you're claiming. But one possibility is that people just think twice about going there. They think maybe it'll close, maybe I'm going to get towed or a ticket or something like that. Thoughts?
I think that's a very good point. So I do think that some of those lots, obviously the school is intended for staff to be parking there, or students to be parking there. The post office is intended for people going to the post office to be going there. And so people would be hesitant necessarily to park there in order to access the downtown. But I do think during certain times, especially if parking is heavily limited within the downtown area, people would be willing to park there as kind of spillover lots. I think it should be communicated more clearly that they are available for public parking at certain times. If it turns out to be a resource that we need, if it becomes more crowded than street parking in the downtown. But I think that's a very realistic concern, that people may be skeptical about parking there initially just because of their uses.
One of the reasons also why we asked our interns to look at those lots was we suspect that they have a lot of capacity that is not tapped, and if we can document that, it may help the city negotiate or otherwise just really show property owners and users of those properties that there's an opportunity to share that a little bit, and that's how agreements can come forward. So it really helps us to see when it's peak and off-peak in those areas.
Do you have an idea about how many, these are snapshots of relatively small number of samples, and there's some space from having an anecdote to having something that is statistically significant. And I wonder how many samples do you think we need to draw conclusions with, a nice p-value or whatever your model is, or am I going way beyond? I'm going way beyond. Okay, forgive me.
I think what you see here, though, is a consistency in the data. It all made sense. Mm-hmm. And yes, we understand it's a snapshot. We like hearing about other times. The Sunday morning time is a good comment. Sunday afternoon also. We have old parking studies that have been done. One was, I think it was as far back as 2011. I believe the chamber did it. And I haven't had a chance to compare, but I'm looking forward to doing that. We also recently did a little bit of a look over by the library. So we have some other points in time as well, and that's helpful. The other thing this is really helpful for us is when we get feedback from merchants that there isn't parking, we need to know if the parking restrictions are working. And this is showing us that the 2-hour parking is affecting turnover. The occupancy goal for a healthy Main Street is on the order of 85 to 90%. You want your visitor to be able to drive down the street if they want a very convenient spot. That 1 in 10 is open. Otherwise, they feel overwhelmed. So you're right about there, which is, it's very, very good data. We were quite excited to see how it turned out.
Well, I hope it turns out in the statistics when we get there. And then the last question I had was, everybody will have, like we say, everybody's a traffic engineer. When we get to the end of a weekend day, there's a great sucking sound of traffic trying to find its way onto Highway 92. And I could imagine that there's some interaction between the traffic being, congesting Main Street and Kelly and all the adjacent streets trying to find their way out. And some people just saying, to heck with it, let's stop and eat. And I wonder if that's another, my conjecture is that might be a high density parking demand time, not one that you looked at, wondering if you think it is or think it isn't.
I think that would be a valuable time to look at later on a weekend day, because obviously if there is significant congestion going down Main Street and trying to exit, people would be trying to park there or take advantage of it, especially people, if anyone's coming north along Highway 1 as well. So that'd be a valuable time to look into in the future.
Great. Thank you again for the study.
Yeah, of course.
Commissioner Reddick, any questions for me?
No, I don't really. Thanks for your hard work. It's, as Vice Chair Benjamin says, it's one set of data to start with, but it's a very good start. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Any additional questions?
Thank you. Yeah, I really enjoyed reading this. It was, and I appreciated the different ways that the information was presented. I did want to, just for everybody's benefit, you mentioned that all of the samples were taken during the summer, but school was in session because it was late August, right? And that was, I think, in the report, but I just want to make sure everybody else realized that school was in session, so.
Yeah, the first few samples were collected in early August, and then the school session was collected in later August, just to be sure that everything had settled in then. But yeah, it was fall school was in session.
Great, yeah. And I did have maybe one thought in that it does seem like there's certain areas like the Stone Pine and the post office are really kind of their own area. And so there's not as much connectivity. And so I think in certain respects, they're kind of a separate bit of information essentially from this. And I would also point out that, I think in addition to some of the signage that already exists in the Stone Pine parking lot, which may be confusing for people, there's also a complete visual barrier of the building from Carter Park, which will have to be addressed in terms of wayfinding, et cetera. Right now, you can only kind of see the parking lot from the other parking, see the park from the other parking lot that's, I guess, to the north that wasn't part of this. And the same kind of goes with the parking lots where the farmer's market is and stuff like that. So, yeah, but I really appreciated this, and it was very helpful. I had one question. One thing that I've noticed when Commissioner Benjamin brought up the kind of that sucking sound as everybody's trying to get out, is I wondered if there was a look at how parking is oriented in terms of what causes clogging and congestion. Because one of the things that I've seen a lot is where people are trying to back out, and you just get this kind of, it just becomes so congested in there that nobody can move, basically. And so I'm wondering if there's any opportunity. I know that in one block you're supposed to back into the parking, and frankly, I look at the sign and then I'm like, I'm just going to go find another place to park, which is the path of least resistance, but that's what I do. So I'm not sure that that's necessarily a solution, but it's just a consideration in terms of parking, not necessarily parking supply, but how it functions with traffic. But again, thank you very much. I really appreciated this.
Congratulate you on the completion of your internship, Mr. Anderson. We'll try not to torture you too much more. How many samples did you take? How many days did you go out and actually measure? I didn't catch that.
So for each of these times, we only did one count of the downtown. Again, this is really just providing a snapshot. It's a beginning to see a general understanding of how parking is in the downtown. So there's only one for each peak time. But again, to create a more solid and reliable source of data, we should go out for multiple different samples.
And did you record somewhere the days that you went?
Yes.
Okay, great. I think everybody else has asked the questions I was getting at, so thank you.
Great. Well, I think this was great, professionally presented and nice report. So I think the city will get a lot of value out of it. So hopefully you got some value out of your internship here as well. Just a couple questions for staff. Where do you see this going forward?
Yeah, thanks. We are going to use this as a platform to pick up some more peak times. One peak that we want to note is we don't want to do a peak like Pumpkin Festival. That's not going to be helpful to us. But the Summer's End Festival is a good peak. It's, I would like us to get out there later Saturday afternoon for the overlapping of time when folks may be leaving town, along with having an event going on. That would be a pretty intense thing for us. We last year had that event. It was really well attended. There was parking signage and traffic control signage because staff anticipated the level of activity for that event, and it was really an important thing to do, and it was effective. So we're actually learning about how Carter Park is functioning under a little more intensity because of that particular function. So that's one area. We'd like to do a few more overlaps of times that were done so we can back them up a bit. And I need to circle back, of course, with the city engineer on anything that he might be concerned about. I love the comment about the form of the parking. A lot of that has to do with streetscape and the options that we may have going forward in compatibility of parking with traffic flow, with bikes, etc. The back-end angle parking on Correa Street, I'm partially guilty for because I'm from Seattle and we do that there on hills. And I've been dying to see if people will do it. And so if you're not doing it, it's good to know that. We need to know if it's going to work. And if people aren't adapting to it, then we need to look at something else.
I'm a sample size of one. So.
Your sample size of one. Okay. I think if you have the backup mirror, you got it. So anyway, there's the kind of configuration of parking. What's great about Half Moon Bay, you have everything. You've got parallel parking, angle parking, back-end angle parking, and this miracle of actually 90-degree parking places on city streets. So we have all kinds of things to look at as we move forward. I was particularly concerned relative to your zoning amendments and some of the parking reductions that we were talking about, because this is the area where that mixed-use zoning is located. So this is also, we hope, informative to you about that.
Commissioner Benjamin?
Hey, I appreciate your question. One follow-up, to get enough instances to make a statistically robust statement, that's going to take some work. Many hands make light work. I wonder if this is the sort of work that volunteers, looking at you colleagues, or maybe some of the business owners downtown who are stakeholders and might be skeptical until or unless they're involved, might be willing to engage on this so that we can learn more and learn more together so that we don't suddenly spring this result on people.
Commissioner Hernandez.
Anecdotally, in the month of August, on one of those Saturdays, I know there was a volleyball tournament going on at the gym, the middle school gym, which is shared with the Boys and Girls Club. I heard a number of business owners, including the folks in Shoreline Station, complain about the lack of parking and how it affected their businesses, the volleyball tournament. This was happening the same time that farmers market was going on. So I think those are events to pay particular attention to, especially given some of the commitments and assurances that were made at the time of the construction of the gym about parking and planning and things like that. So it's just something to take into consideration as we look forward. The other thing I'd look at is one of the claims that's been made through a lot of futurists is that a lot of parking is going to go away. So as you think about parking, I don't know if you've already considered this, but just thinking about are we planning for excess? Are we planning that we're going to have less parking as we get more and more automation and more rideshare type things? So things to consider. I'm channeling my inner John Evans.
Well, yeah, I would be interested in seeing how some of this overlays with our pedestrian network and where, there might be opportunities to alleviate some of our parking just by making really simple improvements in some of the trail connectivity. So, for example, noon on Saturday, seeing the shoreline station here in red and occupied, it's because of the farmer's market. I know myself, riding my bike over there, but there's better connectivity across Kelly Street now, but with the development of the trail along the frontage of Highway 1 or some of those other things, providing some of that more pedestrian access. I think also it could be instructive in where to put signage in education. So also looking at that noon Saturday, and I'm seeing, the farmer's market area, sort of occupancy, and just down the road, the school parking lot is green and less than 50% occupied, and kind of directing people to some of those other parking spaces that might be there. And that might be similar to volleyball occupancy or something like that, directing people, don't necessarily park in Shoreline Station, but there's parking available in these other spots. But anyway, I think there's lots of opportunities to look at this data and look at it with other information that we have. So thank you very much. I don't think we need any formal motion. We can just accept this report. Thank you.
Thank you.
And good luck in school. So moving on to our next item, we have item 1B, coastal development permit and architectural review for a new development at 2119, 221, and 223 Pillarcitos Avenue. And turn it over to Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Commission. This is a new triplex on Pillarcitos. The project consists of a two and a half story triplex with a garage totaling 7,979 square feet. And the improvements include a complete landscaping of the outside the building footprint, widening and replacing the existing concrete sidewalks. The permits requested include a coastal development permit and architectural review, and noticing has taken place for tonight's hearing, which included posting the site, publishing a legal notice in the newspaper, and sending a notice to all the neighbors within 300 feet. Here's a aerial photograph of the neighborhood and the site in green, and you'll notice that on the corner of Pillarcitos and Laurel, and the site is currently vacant, and sidewalks are in fairly poor shape, chipped up here and there. The site is zoned R3, multifamily residential, a zoning district that does allow for triplexes and other multifamily development. A new residence is under construction directly to the south here, and and the other lots surrounding the neighborhood are all multifamily. Between the neighborhood and Cabrillo Highway includes the Coastside Inn, which is essentially screens the site from view from Cabrillo Highway. This slide includes the proposed site plan, and notice that we have one-way entrances and exits for the vehicles, The entrance is off of Pilarcitos here, drops down into the garage, and then the exit is here onto Laurel, which will allow for stacking of vehicles as they leave and not blocking the busier Pilarcitos. The site plan also shows the required private and public open space for each of the units. Patio areas off the front are the private open space, and then we have a common patio area in the back here. Since the Planning Commission packet went out, the applicant has volunteered to add a electric vehicle charger to the visitor parking space up here. And that was noted in the first memorandum that was distributed to you. Let's see. Here's the proposed floor plans. On the left, you've got the garage floor plan, which is pooled parking and one required van accessible space closest to the elevator. The middle part is the first floor plan, and then the second floor plan on the right. Here's the front elevation facing Laurel Street. So since that's the narrower of the two sides, that's considered the actual front of the lot. And you may notice that there is a subtle difference compared to the plans that you were provided. Your staff report noted that there was, maybe some concerns with compatibility with the small balcony that was located on both the front and the rear. They are considering modifying that to something that might be more compatible, but we'll be happy to hear any thoughts on that. And then here's the elevation that faces Pilarcitos Avenue. And you'll notice that the decorative entryways that they've included, the wood posts, the gables, covered entryway with the steps that provide emphasis to the the walkability, the front door, as opposed to just garages facing Pilarcitos. So we're really happy about that. And then here's the rear or the interior side elevation facing east. On this side, you have the walkway, the back entrance to each of the three units. Steps going down, accessing the common open space, as well as bicycle parking, which is another point where we're suggesting that the commission consider modifying the long-term bicycle parking to include some covered bicycle parking in some a configuration that makes sense in the back here. This slide includes the south elevation facing the house that's under construction right now. A little difficult to read, but this is the grading and drainage plan that includes the required stormwater detention along this side, as well as the backup sump pump system for the garage parking. And here's the comprehensive landscape plan that was included with the project. You'll notice that several variety of trees are proposed along the back of the new sidewalk, but outside of the line of sight triangle along the corner. Now, they have included some synthetic turf, which we've noted in the staff report, and the applicant did provide, or has their landscape architect representative here tonight, and I think he's prepared to give a few words about the product that they're proposing there. See, they also will be required to comply with the model water efficiency ordinance that we currently have adopted. And then to give another perspective, here's a couple of renderings for the commission to look at. This is looking from the south onto the front and rear of the building. And then a few things for the commission to consider. The local coastal program, the land use plan, zoning, and CEQA. And let's see. For one, the project has been designed to conform to the development standards that are applicable to the R3 zoning district. Yes, the project site is within a visual resource area, and we have included the findings within the resolution, similar to projects that the commission has recently reviewed to the south along Cabrillo Highway. Since the property originally included several separate parcels, a condition of approval has been included to require a lot merger before a building permit is issued. And then you will also find that there was a second memorandum distributed to the Planning Commission that includes some revised language for the zoning conformance finding. The project is categorically exempt from CEQA, and we've provided that finding as well. I'd be happy to answer any questions. The applicant is also here, as well as a few folks from their design team.
Are there any questions of staff at this point, clarifying questions? Commissioner Reddick.
Thank you, Scott. I'm trying to make sure that I understand the discussion of the alternatives for street trees that you wrote in your response to Vice Chair Benjamin. And am I correct that in general we lean towards requiring those between the street and the sidewalk, but that staff came down on the side of favoring wider sidewalks in this locale?
So I'm sure Scott has the details of what happened with working with the applicant, but we are struggling a little bit with this one in terms of requiring street trees between the sidewalk and the curb edge, because we don't have a lot of room. We would always prefer to have a landscape buffer between pedestrian space and car space. In this case, there's no other streetscape component in the Pilarcitos neighborhood to match it. The city really isn't prepared to upgrade that in any kind of a near-term or even long-term time frame. So it would have been on its own. And we really were liking improving the connection between Kelly and the bridge over Pilarcitos Creek. So it's a compromise, and you're more than welcome to bring this up. And of course, the landscape architect is here and could respond to it. As your kind of town planner opinion that I may share with you is, if you do seek street trees in those locations, we would recommend against grates. They're very expensive. They're really only, in my opinion, suited to downtown environments. I'm not even a fan of them here because I don't think it's your look, but I'm not your new architectural advisory committee, so we'll find out what they think. But in this case, I would really look for something that is more of a landscape strip. It needs to be long enough to really support a big root zone, because it can't be very wide. And then it also, we would have trouble with door swing and things like that. So it's a tight and tricky spot to do this. It's not impossible, and we'd be happy to work with the applicant, but that's why you didn't see it.
Additional questions? Commissioner Hernandez?
Hey, Scott. Thank you for the report. What's the definition of usable open space for a project like this?
be happy to pull that out of the code for you.
And as you pull that up, my understanding from reading the report is there should be about 2,850 square feet of usable open space on the project, about 900, a little over 950 square feet, or around 950 square feet per unit. What I'm interested in while you look that up is, what did we count as usable open space? Is it the areas with turf and the balconies? Does it also include some of these landscaping areas that are really inaccessible because of the driveways? So those are the areas that I'm curious on. It's a lot of project in a fairly compact area. So I'm just curious how we got to the usable open space number here.
So the total open space is the sum of the private and public open space. So you add the two up, and then it has to total the amount that's required. So the open space public means the portion of the development site that has been dedicated to or otherwise set aside for public access, use, or benefit, which in this case would be the the patio area in the back here. So, and then the private open space is the usable open space adjoining and directly accessible to a dwelling unit reserved for the exclusive use of residents of the dwelling unit or their guests. So in this case, it's the little patio areas off the front here, or on the Pilarcito side, as well as a little bit of space in the back here. So, and I worked with the applicant's designer quite closely to conform with this before we scheduled it for the planning commission hearing. And within the plan set, I believe there is a table that breaks out the square footage. So.
I saw the square footage. I was just, I just want to make sure the driveways aren't included in the usable open space. I was curious about the little sliver off to the right, and the sidewalks aren't included in the usable open space as well.
No, and the designer may have a little more information on that as well. So it may be worth it to get his some feedback as well.
Okay, we can have the designer speak about that when we get to that point. Why didn't we have story poles on this project, even though it's in a visual resource area?
So we had a fairly extensive discussion on that, and looked closely at the story pole policy that was adopted by our city council. And in this case, the visual resource area is the Highway 1 corridor. The story poles would not be visible at all from the corridor. Therefore, the project doesn't affect the visual resource area at all. And so, and the director has the ability to modify the requirements when it makes sense. In this case, they would be spending money on story poles that wouldn't affect the visual resource area. So, and staff went out and verified that the site is not visible at all from the highway because of the existence of the co-site inn. So,
Very
and
good.
then other multifamily housing. So,
Very good. And then finally, I noticed in the geotechnical study that the survey of the soil was done in July. You're building subterranean garage in an area that's subject to flooding. I'm curious if I didn't see anything in the report that indicated, at least nothing that a layperson like myself could understand, to indicate that how they're going to deal with the the water table at that level. I know I live roughly at the same, roughly in the same area, and the water table is about 3 feet below the surface during flooding there at times. So I'm just curious, is there any concern about flooding and drainage for the subterranean parking there?
Yes, so they did provide a proposal on the system to handle the rising water table. And fortunately, the design team did bring their civil engineer here this evening. So I think he would be better equipped, or she, excuse me, better equipped to answer that question.
Great.
So.
No further questions for me.
Okay, additional questions? Sarah, you have any questions at this time?
One quick question. Were there any comments from provided from the neighbors noticed for this?
Sorry, could you repeat your question?
Were there any comments provided by the neighbors when they were noticed about it?
No, we didn't receive any feedback at all, either verbally or in writing, from anyone for this project. So.
Okay, Commissioner Benjamin.
So first, thank you for the answers. I asked a few questions over the weekend, and thank you for the answers to those questions. Listening to my colleagues prompted a couple of others, and your report opened the door to considering additional bicycle parking. With respect to the electrical vehicle parking, I'm not clear on whether, not so much our plan specifically, but broader governing law for energy made statements about what we could require, not just for visitor parking, but for resident parking. And I'm interested in whether, I would assume that you're happy from a legal standpoint with what's been proposed, but the futurist model, there have been a lot of stories even in today's press about the large automobile industry manufacturers like Volkswagen moving in a big way to electrical. Makes me feel like we should at least ask for additional electrical vehicle parking. And if our requirements make that easy, maybe required. If it doesn't, just acknowledge that we don't have to, but it would be really nice to get it. It would probably make the site more marketable.
Could I ask that you just keep this to just clarifying questions on the staff's?
I'm sorry. Thank you. I rescind everything except what is the requirement for electric vehicle parking for residents, if any.
So the director and I had a chance to sit down with the building inspector and go over, what is actually required in the building code. And at this point, the current code as well as the upcoming building code cycle does not require electric vehicle charging stations. But there is a 10% raceways required, which are basically the conduit that's to allow for future installation of electric vehicle chargers. So that's the only requirement in the upcoming building code. So.
I see. Thank you. Thanks for reminding me for regular order. I appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
And
Commissioner
one final question, just to make sure on the tick the box on the public notifications. I went by the site today, and the sign for this public hearing is hidden behind an RV. It's kind of hard to see. Did we send out notifications to the neighbors? Mail? Was all that taken care of?
Yes. So notification was sent out to all the property owners within 300 feet, and then all the renters within 100 feet. So.
Great. Thank you.
And just quick, do you know the intention of this? Would this be for sale housing, or is this rental housing? Are these individual condo units, or?
Yeah, I think that would be an excellent question for the applicant.
Okay, thank you. So with that, maybe I'll ask if the applicant has a few words, or if they want to answer some of the questions that have come up, and then we can open up for the public comment. Make sure you got the light on green there.
Hi, I'm Jason Silva. I'm the applicant. Just want to talk a little bit first about the project and how it came about. We kind of feel like this project answers a lot of the issues that impact us locally, especially in that area. I got to spend some time down there, researching, and I kind of got pushed in that direction by Scott because originally we were looking at different ways of building this that would be feasible for us, a way to build it that would be financially feasible for us, of course. And we spent a lot of time with Scott going over that, and we wanted to kind of be an answer to some of the issues over there, especially regarding the lack of rental housing in that area. You would think we'd have a lot of rental housing area, but when you research it, you realize there's not much available, hardly any. The other issue that we noticed over there was parking. Scott brought that to my attention. Now, I live in a different neighborhood, so I didn't know that existed over there. But I got to spend some time there and ran into a couple neighbors, and that was kind of cool. There's a great vibe over there. There's a lot of activity. There's a lot of kids in the street, families, and it was kind of a groovy little place. So I really enjoyed spending time there. But there's three things I want to mention. Is number one is we maximize density by adding much needed housing. Our plan does. Our project provides a vital connection between the zoning requirements and the need for rental housing. We ended up getting 3 units, 4 bedrooms. Some have 2.5 baths, some have 3 baths, but we were able to get 4-bedroom units in there. So that's going to maximize density. These are, in fact, going to be rental units. We're going to be renting them out or providing. Together, we achieve both maximizing the density of the site and providing much needed housing for our community. And number 2, we're addressing the local needs to maximize on and off-street parking. If you want to go to Exhibit 4, originally when we were looking at doing this project, we had a plan brought to us that looked just like that. That's actually a project there on Willow Avenue. And you can see there that there's not much on-street parking. And as a matter of fact, the garages themselves were full of stuff. So I did a little donkey work there, as you guys call research, and did the whole sample thing. And I realized that, according to UCLA, that only 25% of people use their garages, 25% on average. I looked at a couple other ones, and there was a 45% in there. So you guys could do the math. You were good at that today. Where'd that young man go? Anyway, so our subterranean parking plan addresses the local needs of on and off-street parking by maximizing the front footage of the property and using the subterranean parking for parking exclusively. So our parking below, actually, you can't hide your stuff in there. You can't store your stuff in there. It will be used specifically for parking. And then my final point is creating spaces for unique interactions and experiences. Our design is committed to creating spaces for unique interaction. We believe high density is a necessity there. People-filled cities or cities for people require good projects that draw people out into environments that encourage interaction, furthering conversations of community, inclusion, and unity. With the help of Ken, our landscaper, and Scott, we have created really cool places and spaces there for that. And you can go back to A4 if you want. We can look at those. But the front porches, they promote interaction to the Pilcitos Avenue. I was out in front there, and I actually ran across a neighbor, and we sat there for several minutes talking. So we designed those front porches not to just be at the level, the first street level. We brought them down a little bit more to the street. As I was looking around the neighborhood, there was kids playing in the street. They were in front yards. There was families out in their front yards in chairs, and I thought that was a cool vibe to stick with. So we, with Ken, designed these porches that will interact with the community there and draw people out into those forums. We also, in the back there, created a place where they could congregate neighbors and barbecue. So in that back corner is a good spot for that. And hopefully the landscape artists could come and talk a little bit about that. But it's a super unique place there. And originally when we went there to build, we were just building for rental income. And as we got drawn into the community there, and Scott showing us some of the things that we could do, I think we came up with a great project that will add to the quality of life there. So in closing, we hope the Planning Commission recognizes our project is designed to make a difference in a small way for a bigger need. Our project maximizes density by adding much needed housing. It addresses local needs to maximize on and off street parking and creates amazing spaces for unique interaction and experiences. Thank you.
Thank you. I wouldn't mind hearing from the landscape architect. Specifically, I have some questions on the use of the artificial turf.
Hey, how you doing? Casey Coverdell with Blue Sky Designs. We're the landscape architects on the project. And just in initiating the design and our approach to the design, we talked a lot about the things that he's discussed. But our 3 points were: 1, water conservation; 2, keeping it low maintenance, especially with a multi-residential unit. You know, maintenance is going to be something that has to be tackled. And 3, it's that, you know, this is a big project that's getting built in an established neighborhood. So we need something that's aesthetically pleasing and is going to be comforting for the rest of the neighbors who are already living there and have to live with the construction. And as soon as it's built, they get to enjoy this beautiful aesthetic and nice new possibility for the neighborhood. So with water conservation, as we talked about, we went through, created this landscape design with 97% native plants. The 3 different varieties of plants that we didn't use are proven plants that we use personally with our landscape company that we know work really well on the coast. And they're focused along that back fence line because they're espaliered podocarpus. They look really nice and create a beautiful green screening along that fence right there, as well as the other trees on across the pathway around where the bike area is going to be. And then finally, there is an existing willow that's back in that barbecue area right there in the little community barbecue spot. And then as far as water conservation goes, all of the landscape was designed with a drip irrigation system, automatic drip. And we've gone through the WUCL's list, so we understand how much water is needed per plant. And we've gone through and calculated for all the MWILO and everything, and it's very low water use for the amount of landscape area that it's actually providing for the residences there. A third point with the water conservation is, as we've discussed, the artificial turf. And there are many sod options, and native no-mow sod is a great option, but with our experience, we've actually had and tested the native no-mow sod in large areas, and it does require water, it does require maintenance, and as you let it grow, it does have a longevity, and it has a lifespan that is not more than 10 years. So this is why we chose this artificial turf, and if you'd like, I can pass it around if you guys like to see it. So we work with a fellow contractor who helped design this artificial turf, and what you'll see about it is they actually took the makeup of a blade of grass. So it's called a sea blade. So it actually stands up by itself, looking very natural, as you can see there. And then it has a little bit of that kind of brownish frill underneath it. So it's a very realistic looking grass. This is a perfect place to use it because 1, we're saving water, and 2, it's low maintenance, and 3, it's very safe for children to play on. And it's something that is going to look nice and not have to be maintained over time. It's also very pet friendly because it's a lot easier to wash, we don't really want to talk about it, but wash that stuff out of the out of the turf areas. But so moving into that low maintenance, these plants are 97% native plants, as we talked about. And the way that we designed this garden, selecting standard varieties of California native trees out front, like the Ceanothus Ray Hartman, and things like the Citriodora, the Cupressa Citriodora over by the guest parking lot. All the plants that we've selected for this landscape are meant to grow. They're not meant to be cut into topiary and maintained like that. They're planted, they grow, and they're low maintenance. They're also beautiful and adding to the natural native landscape and coastal landscape. So as far as aesthetics go, as you can see, it's a very beautiful landscape layout. We've created this public space in the back, and if you look closer onto the actual plant selection, we've selected a bunch of edible and edible plants in the background around the public space by the barbecue. So there's actually thyme and rosemary and bay trees and citrus tree right there, all things that can be used by the residences and enjoyed in that nice little public barbecue area. And that's basically what I got going on. If you have any questions, feel free.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Hernandez.
Can you talk about the willow tree there? And I don't know if this goes to you or city staff. I don't know if it qualifies as a heritage tree. But what's the plan for the care and feeding of that tree longer term?
Well, so what we've created is we've actually put it into its own planter, tucked into that seat wall, as you can see on the back edge. And so proposed to us was to keep it. And I guess that would be a better question for Scott about the actual heritage tree part. So go ahead.
So we didn't ask for for the applicant to measure it because it was never proposed to remove it. It's always, the discussion has always been, let's preserve the willow tree. And so what we'll do is require exclusionary fencing during construction to avoid any sort of construction materials that's stored underneath it or damaging the tree during excavation especially. So
Great, thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Commissioner Benjamin.
Yeah, thank you, welcome. I appreciated the chance to have a look at the the turf sample. I appreciate that some of the sod, they're living things, they have lifespans. Most manufacturers' products have some kind of lifespan. What is the lifespan of this product?
This product right here has like a 15-year warranty on the actual product, and so as far as seeing it actually installed, that's about the lifespan that I've seen, where it's been aesthetic, not really aesthetic, but small things, more like repairs, not rips or burns or having it fade color and stuff like that, or mostly about edging, having it reattached, maybe leveling out the surface underneath it. But as far as the product goes, it's got a very long lifespan.
In question to staff then, so in the condition A6 for landscape maintenance, are we including, I assume that this is a maintenance in perpetuity, that this is not just until, a year after or whatever. Does the maintenance of the turf product, does that fit into this definition, or is that a separate question?
yes, that would be included in the landscape maintenance.
And I'm assuming that there's some evidence of the safety of this product. I'm sure over the past decade, there's been conversations about the safety of ball fields, temperature,
Right.
Chemical leach, things like that. Do we have the information in place to be confident that we're not affecting groundwater and that we're not putting, lead or some other metal or other toxic chemical into our neighborhood?
Yes, I believe so. Yeah,
Thank
this product is made locally here in the East Bay, and so as far as the leaching into the ground, there's been no information on that. So.
Thank you.
Sir, did you have a question?
I was wondering, what are the sizes of the two areas that will be this artificial turf?
I don't have an exact square footage off the top right here, but they are represented here on the two areas next to the parking lot.
So, Scott, What's the area of the common patio in the background there?
So it's a 20-foot front yard setback, so I would estimate
Yeah.
it's probably around 500 square feet.
500 square feet.
Yeah, at the most. So
For the one on at the corner?
both total.
Both combined.
Both total,
Yeah.
okay.
Commissioner Reddick, any questions at this time?
In your experience with that turf, does it prove to be pervious as they claim?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's set on a on Class 2 base rock, and that and you can see definitely with the makeup of the bottom, it allows for water to pass through freely.
Okay, I don't have any additional questions of the applicant, so with that, I'm going to open up the public hearing. I've got one speaker's card. If anybody else wishes to speak, go ahead and open one. So we have Ellen Gartside.
Good evening. I'm Ellen Gartside. I live at 451 Laurel Avenue, about 1 block west of this project. I've lived in the neighborhood for 6 years, and I am here tonight in support of the project at 219, 221, and 223 Pilarcitos Avenue. This neighborhood is the most logical location for high-density housing since it is already primarily duplexes and condos. The neighborhood is within walking distance to public transportation, grocery stores, downtown and the beach. And I really think the underground parking is a brilliant idea. I can verify Jason's observations about garages being used for storage and not parking cars. I have been a renter in Half Moon Bay since 2001, and I have observed the dramatic decline in the inventory of long-term rentals due to the increasing Airbnb market. Half Moon Bay needs more long-term rental opportunities, which is why I'm asking the commission to approve this project. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Got no other speaker cards, so if you wish, jump up right now. Otherwise, we're closing the public hearing, and we'll bring it back to the commission for discussion. Any discussion?
So I'm generally supportive of the project. I think it's a thoughtful design. I think the only thing that again, I think it's a thoughtful design. I commend you for it. I like the fact that you've tried to make it fit into the neighborhood. It's a bit of a design desert there, so I appreciate the fact that you guys are trying to do something that's a little more thoughtful than some of the other projects in the area. And looking at the color renderings, I had a hard time getting a real sense of the texture of the project. So that's one of the areas where, it doesn't really stand out to me. I can see some of the contrasts, but in some of the detailed drawings, there's a lot more contrast and design work, but in the 3D color renderings, I don't really get that. But otherwise, I think this is a pretty good project. I think it's thoughtful, and I drove through the neighborhood on the way to the Planning Commission meeting today, so I very supportive of this, and I like the EV charging. I think the turf is fine. I think that the bikes would be a great addition, and I like the open patio area that is there. I'm a little concerned about if the willow tree is actually going to survive, because it looks like it sits on top of it overlaps with where part of the structure is from looking at the drawings, but I'll leave that to you guys to figure out the implementation details. And if something needs to be done, I'm sure the city will figure out a replacement strategy.
Thank you. Commissioner Polgar, any additional comments?
Yeah, I'm very supportive of this project. I really like that the units are family oriented in terms of their size, their connection to the neighborhood, to the street. I like that with the little patios as well. I think that's great. I'm happy with the proposed plantings. doesn't hurt that ceanothus is my favorite plant ever, as my neighbor can attest. But I think they'll grow quite well, and I think they are very low maintenance, and can't pick a better, and there's quite a few of them. I think that's a really good location for them. I think that I'm fine with the artificial turf. The only thing I would say is that the portion that's in I guess this is, I'm not sure which direction this is facing now. The top left in the slide that's showing right now, I'm wondering if, to a certain extent, like turf is, I think would be, on the bottom left, will be used by, kids. I could see them doing things, because the space is big enough to actually do some activity on, and I think they will. But I don't know about the space to the other side of the driveway, I guess. That little, I'm wondering if that's even worth it. It seems like, my guess is that that's needed for, you don't want to have high vegetation there because the cars are coming out maybe, but I don't know, it just kind of seems like a little bit of a wasted space. I feel the same way about grass though, so I don't know, I'm not suggesting that it be replaced with grass. I just am saying that I'm not sure that maybe could just have low ground cover or something like that in that spot. But it would require watering. I don't know that you have to spend that much water on it though with the drip. I did have one thing that wasn't clear. I didn't care for the metal grate or whatever that was outside of the little patio door. It was something, Scott, you mentioned at the beginning that they had proposed to remove, but it also looked like they just kind of removed the entire little balcony. And I was wondering, is that intentional? So there wouldn't be any, not even replaced with like a window? And I'm sorry, I probably should have asked this one earlier, but I just realized that it looked like there was a complete removal of it, which it may be fine because then there's noise reduction as well, but.
Yeah, when we looked at that with Scott, originally when we did the project, it fit right in. And just kind of got left there, stuck to the side of the house. So Scott brought it up, we took it off, and then as we looked at the floor plan, we realized there's not much room in the living room for TV space and all that stuff. Yeah. So on that side, we removed it completely. On the other side, because it's kind of south-facing, we thought it's we can get more sun out of that corner, so we actually just put a window there instead and got rid of those balconies. Those balconies, design-wise, are problematic anyway, water and things like that. So we just kind of just omitted it.
And I'm totally supportive of that. I just wanted to make sure that I was understanding correctly. I agree. I don't think the balcony was adding much in that, especially on that north side, the north side. So, and the other, I really appreciate that the sidewalks are going to be widened. I think that having that better access along there, I appreciate that about the project, and that that's included. So I think that's really important. I don't think that I have friends who live in that neighborhood, and so I spent enough time there to realize it's not like trees everywhere. In fact, I don't know of any of the streets that I'm thinking of right around there that have street trees. And so I agree with staff's kind of recommendation on that. So I'm fully supportive. Also, I'm pretty sure that across the streets, so along Laurel and across the street from the proposed project, that complex has below ground parking.
Yeah, actually it does. There's several below ground parking. Matter of fact, the civil engineer's here today.
Maybe because I hadn't been aware of problems with flooding, but maybe it would be good to find out if that is an issue and whether that's been dealt with.
So I spoke to the Pastorinos. They're like the first ones that actually started doing this on Kelly, the underground parking, their buildings there, and they haven't had a problem. And then Keaton Arahan recently built one on Pine, and he's about as low as we are. I kind of copied him a little bit. So he has had no problems, and actually they're enjoying the space quite well. But again, we have the civil engineer who could probably speak to this better than I could, if you wanted to ask her.
Do you need additional information, or?
I guess only if it's been an issue, and then if it has been an issue, how it's been, how the proposed project would deal with that, I guess. So that's the only question.
Hi, so Carla Castro, Liam Braze Engineering. Flooding has not been an issue, so I'm wondering if the concern with the flooding is coming more from having that street water from the gutter come into. Is that where the concern is coming from for potential flooding? I want to make sure I understand that question.
During the rainy season, several intersections in the area, puddle and pool water. I'm not sure if it's right on this property, but I know we've had a number of issues, areas we've reported, and I would just ask city staff to look at some of the drainage things and see if there are issues in the area. I know a little further down the ways near Pelosido Creek, you do see drainage issues. So I just want to make sure that there aren't any issues there, and we're not. I know that there is underground parking. I'm looking at a photo of it on Google Street View, and I've parked in some of those units in the past. So just want to make sure that we've learned from the projects nearby.
Perfect. No, that's a great question. It has not been an issue in the past. Currently, we've been working with the city engineers to, as part of the expansion of that sidewalk, to design to make sure we do have a flow line. We don't have any spots, as that all is going to be ripped out, replaced, and brand new to be ADA compliant. We have gone through the analysis to make sure we don't have any low spots, we don't have any dips. We've also provided at the driveway entrances. It's not, if you can see, I guess that is a little hard to read, we can't zoom in. As you can see, when you actually approach, you actually come up. So there is a high point right at the property line before you descend back down into, down to the below grade driveway on both ends. And it's about a 6-inch delta that we have before you're able to basically overreach that high point and have water streaming down.
Great, thank you. Any additional questions? You had a piggyback question?
Yeah, I wanted to tailgate on Rick, and as long as you're here.
Yeah,
and that was, I asked and appreciated the question with respect to the storm frequency significance.
Yes.
That was the design criteria, which was, I think, a 10-year storm.
Yes.
Do we have a sense of the freeboard? I mean, we're living in climate change, increasingly bursty weather patterns. Do we have a sense of the freeboard based on the experience of the neighboring development? Are they close? Do they feel like they, are a long way from flooding, or they're missing by the skin of their teeth, or do we have no data? Or do you have projections for this one?
For the flooding of the actual street or the actual site?
The site. Well, being, your storm system, the design system, being able to handle the storm with some freeboard, and I'm just trying to understand what that is. So if our storm patterns increase, we know that.
Perfect. No, I think I actually have, so in terms of freeboard, we mainly actually provided as, I'm sorry, don't mind me looking through these pages really quickly.
No, not at all.
We actually call it out as percent over what we actually require. So again, we work with the engineer does. We do have to accommodate minimum 10-year, 2-hour storm duration, which we have complied. With regards to that, we do have, I believe, and this is part of the report that goes to the engineering, so I don't think.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot to dig it out.
This will be part of the engineer's review.
Yeah, I'm interested, but if it's not right there at your fingertips, I'm not asking you to go dig it out.
I have to go through the report, but it is, I think we did have about 30% increase just for that freeboard, or just to accommodate an extra 30% above what the city requires for that 10-year, 2-hour storm.
Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Commissioner Reddick?
Thanks. Yeah, I think this is a very well-designed project. It provides a kind of housing that fits very well in that environment. It's going to aesthetically fit in well and be a strength in the neighborhood. I think the benefit of the underground parking is certainly clear in the way that it frees up parking on the street around there. It's pretty rare in Half Moon Bay, and I guess I've been used to in the past assuming that the underground parking is rare because of concerns about the soft soils and the groundwater here. But if the geotech reports have been done the way they need to, and we see examples of it of it succeeding and working well very nearby, then I'm happy with that. And I do understand, despite my ever-present liking for the street trees, I do understand that this is an important thoroughfare. Given the unappealing nature of walking along the west side of Highway 1, this is can be a pretty important boulevard to get from Kelly to the park and Safeway and such. So I'm good with all those details.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Benjamin.
Thank you. So now that it's back to the commission, I want to follow up on the electrical. So, Scott, that was a very helpful answer from me, making a powerful distinction between the requirements for an actual electric vehicle charging station and the raceways that would facilitate it. And I guess a question for the applicant, if I might, is as we move headlong into an era of electric vehicles, there's so much forward thinking in your design, which I really appreciated. And I wonder if, construction time is the time to plan the ampacity, if not the raceways, that would allow your project to support electric vehicles. That's a common complaint on the electric vehicle websites, is that if you have a single family residence, you can do it, but the apartments haven't been planned to accommodate the 50 amp lines in a raceway, or at least the ampacity in the box to do that could really make a difference.
Yeah, so that's why we all park out in front of the city and plug in there. No, I'm just kidding. No, I think the raceways is a wise idea. The reason why we put it in the parking above the additional parking was because we wanted everybody to have an opportunity to use it, to actually put the EV unit in. So we're going to put the unit in, but we can definitely, as a condition, have raceways provided for each stall. That's not a big expense. And as this technology grows, I'm sure it'll accommodate all the different technologies out there, the raceways that we have to put in. So,
thank you.
Yeah.
And with respect, I'm sure you thought about solar, probably didn't pencil out. Any thoughts that you want to share with us on that?
They did think about solar, and it doesn't pencil out. We kind of went in the red a little bit with the underground parking. That's the other reason why you don't see much of it. It's pretty expensive. But overall, it gave us an additional unit and increased density, so we kind of penciled a little bit out on that, but as far as solar, it doesn't at this time.
Well, the prices are coming down maybe in the future.
Yeah.
So thank you for the answers. My thought on this project was I really like it. I felt like it was evolved. I think it represented a creative, fresh feeling. When I went around the neighborhood, I felt like I was looking at the future of that neighborhood as it redevelops. So thank you for showing us a vision that is feasible. I really appreciate it. And with that answer and the other answers I had, I'm going to be fully supportive of this project.
Great. I'm supportive as well. This is one of those lots I've ridden my bike by here many times on my way to Safeway or elsewhere and wondered, why the heck isn't this property developed yet? So good opportunity. I'm glad. I think you're maximizing the site, like the underground parking. I think the landscaping is great, and yeah, overall, I think the design is great for the neighborhood, and appreciate the adding to the rental stock in the community. That's important. So with that, I'm happy to entertain a motion.
We don't have any conditions to add on this resolution, do we? Except as
There's a revised finding.
revised.
Finding number 4, and you have that separate in a memo. If you don't have it, let us know.
I heard Commissioner Benjamin mention the raceway. Now, my understanding is that the building code currently requires that raceway. Was that what I was understanding, Scott? Is that the applicant's proposing to install a separate charging station, and the recent building code updates require essentially sort of readiness to install future systems within the garage.
Almost, actually. So the upcoming building code cycle is going to require 10% of the parking spaces to have the raceway. So, and the applicant has volunteered to install an electric vehicle charging station for the visitor parking space.
And I think I heard the applicant indicate they'd be willing to look at installing the sort of raceway with.
Yes, and I'd have to clear that with the owner, but I think an additional raceway would be appropriate. And again, it's not that expensive, so we can look at doing all of them. I do believe at some point we're all gonna have it.
Yeah, I understand.
We're putting it in our home now, so
Clarification.
I don't see it being a problem.
I didn't mean to impose it as a draconian condition.
No, I understand. I was just trying to understand what was already code and what was additional conditions.
I would if there's no objection, but if you feel the slightest hesitancy to see it as a condition, I won't stand on it. I just think it's economically a winner for you.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with the condition. Again, I represent the owners, so.
Thank you.
But I don't have a problem
So
with it.
yeah, I'd like it. So your motion's on the floor or no? Okay, moving the resolution next in order with the modifications described in the staff memos that were released with respect to findings. I think those were the only ones. And then the addition of the raceways in the parking area to facilitate electric vehicle charging in all of the stations downstairs at some future time.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Moving on through the agenda, I believe that was our last public hearing item, once I can find it. And now we have our director's report. You all are free to go if you wish, unless you want to sit through this part.
All right, thank you for that. We really appreciate your input on that project because we can inform other applicants with the feedback you've had on this tonight, so thank you. Coming up for you on September 24th, we will have a study session on the land use plan. The land use plan draft is out for the last week of public comment. That period will close on Friday. Staff will do our best to sum up the comments for you. Our intent is to get anything else pitched out of that information that we have so that you can see what folks are saying and you can talk about it with each other and give us some direction about it. Then we'll be going on from there to work on our revision. Noting, of course, that now we're thanking our subcommittee, our ad hoc Planning Commission committee, who has now gets to go off and work with you as a commission in these forums and won't be toiling quite as much, I hope. We really put them through the paces, obviously, and we will thank them quite a bit more later, so thank you. We are also working on a coastal development permit for the Poplar Stairs. It's just really become very concerning. We need to put stairs in. We did an emergency drainage permit recently, and part of the follow-up to that is to deal with a kind of a short to mid-term solution for staircase. And you'll see it either on the 24th or October 8th. We're going to bring it to you as soon as we possibly can so it can be installed before the rainy season. We are working in a lot of detail with Coastal Commission staff on this to make sure that they are fully informed about the details on this one. You probably noticed tonight that we didn't have the other item that we thought was going to be ready, the terrace home. And we're hoping to have that ready for you October 8th. If not, we'll figure something else out wonderful to bring that evening. October 22nd, we have the Greenbrier appeal coming back to date certain. And I've got a kind of a loose holding place for zoning amendments that I've been working on with Sarah Clark to bring those back, some progress on those in October if we can. We sent out a save the date, and I might have given Bridget the wrong date. It's supposed to be Tuesday, October 29th. It's a fifth Tuesday, and I probably told her, did I? Okay, that's me. October 29th, the City Council is also saving the date. We are intending to have a joint study session with City Council that evening and to discuss the land use plan and hopefully as much of a revised draft as we can have ready for you that night so that council can start to really get caught up to where the commission is while you're deliberating about it and preparing to go into public hearing mode on it and then make your recommendations. So we really want to have overlap and allow for that dialogue in a public forum between council and planning commission. We will let you know, we'll confirm that as soon as we can do that, but if you're able to let Bridget know if you're going to be in town and can manage a fifth Tuesday meeting, please let us know. You know, every year when I look at the calendar, we circle all the fifth Tuesdays and we get excited about what we can do. So just be aware. You guys are busy and we have a lot of projects. City Council has a very full agenda coming up next Tuesday, September 17th, with things that have been of interest to you. The Bicycle Pedestrian Master Plan adoption is noticed for public hearing and we'll be going to them. The Architectural Advisory Committee appointments will be before them. They have reviewed a Measure D status update at their last meeting and requested that staff prepare a resolution and some methodology for policy work with regards to transferring, if they choose to transfer certificates or allocations from the downtown area to outside downtown. And that's been a really interesting thing going on this year. We'll give you an update on that when we come back with the zoning amendments. But right now, all of the outside downtown Measure D certificates have been issued. And so to do any more this year, that transfer would need to be approved. And the code isn't real clear about how to do that. And as far as I can tell, we've never had to do it. And this is a story about your accessory dwelling unit ordinance being quite successful in its first year. Also, another matter that you've seen, the Carnoustie Phase 4 subdivision, the final map will be going to council September 17th. I'm working with the city's housing consultant to also have some materials ready for council on their affordable housing fund and other matters in October. Matters coming up to the community development director hearing, back to the Carnoustie items, September 18th, Scott is prepared to bring the ninth hole golf course grading. This is where the off-haul from the Carnoustie project is being proposed to go, and you had a condition of approval that any location that is to receive soil removed from the Carnoustie Phase 4 site, if it's within the coastal zone, that it have a coastal development permit, and that is what we'll be doing before the director's hearing. And it's really a heavily engineered project, and it's ready for that. October 2nd, we have a proposed home remodel with an accessory dwelling unit at 427 Metzger. And I've been asked to, and we worked it into Ryan's presentation, but to plug one more time the Summer's End Music Festival, Carter Park, September 21st. There's details on the city's website. And that's all we have. Thank you.
I have a quick question.
Commissioner Hernandez.
A comment. I know we don't have a public hearing item. Just Poplar Stairs, currently that's an area that the horse community claims to have paid for and paved the ramp that's on Poplar Beach. Just passing along historical information. I don't have an opinion as to how that should be used. It's just a piece of historical information I've received, and it's come to me as legend at this point. And the other thing is, for the previous project, I have a friend who lives at 466 Laurel who does have below-ground parking in that area. It does flood. It does get water. It doesn't flood, but it gets water. It pools, so there are some drainage issues in the area that, as the city engineer looks at the project, you guys should think about that.
Commissioner Bender.
Thank you. So the comment about the Poplar stairs may obviate this question, but just so I'm clear, back in, it was either December or January, we got a report of the emergency CDP. This is the regular CDP follow-up to that, or if not, what's the plan for the regular CDP? 6 months was the normal required time to get it in process.
Yeah, we have an application. We're working on the Poplar Gateways plan, and it's gotten quite complicated to tease apart the near-term and the midterm and the longer-term requirements, in particular the near-term where they're overlapping each other. So we will report out about that when we see you as soon as the stairs are ready and what is going on with the drainage. And of course, again, that part of it is also being coordinated with Coastal Commission staff. So they're working with our planner and city engineer.
Also, this is just a question. Sorry, we haven't gotten to reports yet. Forgive me.
Oh, okay. Any additional questions?
Well, Jill, if I might, thank you for the heads up about what's coming. Is it possible for you to give us any rough idea of the LCP process in Planning Commission and City Council beyond that joint study session?
We'll try to do that at your next meeting on the 24th, when you have your study session of the follow-up of the comments. We haven't seen all the comments yet. We need to see what that looks like. And we certainly have a map of meetings lined up, but we need to see what the volume is and how much work we have to do.
Very good. Any additional questions? That we can go into Planning Commission communications.
Thank you. So over Labor Day weekend, I noticed that there was quite a bit of additional traffic, like we all saw. For those of you who weren't close to Venice Beach, the parking lots, the overflow lot, which is frequently opened during high traffic periods, was opened. One change in the process was that there were some big dumpsters that the State Beach people put down to pick up trash, which was a big success relative to the kind of trash that we receive when it's opened at other times. There's been an increased number of days that it's been open this summer, and without those dumpsters, we get an awful lot of trash. So I really appreciate the fact that they were there for that one weekend. Now that we're not there anymore, but people are still coming, they've learned that they can use that site, we're seeing a lot of trash because people have learned. Similarly, the informal trails on the bluff top that had largely recovered from the use have once again appeared about a foot wide, about 2 feet off the edge of the bluff. So as our plans evolve, I want to be sure we have headway, that we're not going to create a new problem north of Poplar that looks a lot like the problem at Poplar. Also, I wanted to report, after walking, spending some quality time on the wastewater treatment plant road, Bev Cunha Country Road. The goat grazing was extraordinarily effective. It exposed all kinds of trash. The areas where they weren't seemed to be rabidly popular with the birders. So I think we rung the bell, if measured by the outcome, even though there was a little turbulence here and there. Very nice work.
Very good. There's no other Planning Commission communications. We can adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.